I'm a pagan, a nature pagan, so this time of the year would be influencing my ritual, and also the moon or the tides, that kind of thing. But very much also mythology, particularly with this type of thing. I like to do a ritual where I kind of take the myth, the story, and like open it up and step inside it. Sometimes as, like literally as Inanna, walking through those 7 gates and experiencing what is it like to have those things removed from me? What is it like to transit through those gates, one after another? Yeah.
Thank you.
When I hear those words, journey to the dark goddess, who is this dark goddess? And I mean a lot of things by using those words, the dark goddess. I think many of us are familiar with her through myth and through fairy tale as well, where she's often a key and really quite frightening, sometimes even depicted as evil character. The dark goddess is often someone in these myths and fairy stories that you have to visit. There's no choice about it. She somehow holds the key. She's got some secret or some gift or some clue that the main character in a fairy story or a myth has to have. And so because of that, they set out on a journey towards her. The dark goddess has a lot of names through different mythologies and different cultures. Some of them are Ereshkigal, Persephone, Hecate, Morrigan, and there are many, many others. Kali is another one from Indian mythology. And usually, as I said, she's depicted as someone who is really quite frightening, incredibly powerful, and holds the keys of mystery in her domain, which is often called the underworld. It's some kind of realm that is dark and shadowy. It's often cavern-like. It's often quite dangerous to travel there and very, very difficult to return from if you ever do make the trip. So I think that some of that is a little misleading, and in my concept of journeying to the dark goddess, I think that the journey to the dark goddess is something that many of us have undertaken unwillingly in our lives. That at different times in our lives where we've been in crisis, sometimes not even our fault. Feeling that things are being stripped away from us. It can be through ill health, it can be through the death of someone we really, really love. It can be through a series of crises that come through our life, one after another, until we feel that really there's almost nothing left. And then at that point, we set out to seek an answer, to find out what's going on, and how to recover ourselves, how to recover our lives. And in that place kind of past trauma, in the depths of ourselves, in the depths of unknowing, something happens. It's not always clear to us exactly what it is that is happening, but somehow we meet something. We meet, I would call it the dark goddess, but other people could say a nemesis or a mirror or a part of ourselves that's usually hidden from us. And in meeting that essence, that truth, we begin to be able to turn our lives around, to come back from that dark place where almost often we thought we would never return from, depending on how severe the circumstances are. Now, I have had some really terrible times in my life, in particular with depression, and a feeling several times at least of having everything stripped away from me, piece by piece, of relationships, sometimes health, housing, everything that I was relying on, feeling that I was left with nothing. And it's quite frightening and quite out of control. Now, it has occurred to me along the way that this is not something that happened only to me. Actually, this is something that happens to everyone in their life. Usually at least once, but sometimes many times. And some people even have that experience in childhood of growing up in that kind of underworld, hidden state where nothing seems stable and everything is unknown and dangerous. So it occurred to me in this realization that this happens to everyone, not just to me. That it's not perhaps something that is unfair or even a tragedy. It's actually a part of life. It's actually something that happens to everyone regularly as a part of their life, several times in their lives, that they meet this great undoing of themselves. So then I had to ask, if that's the case, if this happens to everyone, to all of us, maybe many times in our lives, why is it that we're so badly prepared? Why is it that when this happens to us, it's like a disaster, it's like something we'd never considered could ever happen to us, or that could possibly happen in these circumstances? You know, if that happens to it, if that can be expected to be a part of our lives, why aren't we taught how to do this thing? Why aren't we prepared for it? Why don't other people talk about how it's happened for them and what they've learned about how to do this process when you lose everything that's important to you in your life, how you recover yourself? Why isn't it part of like the school curriculum almost, that we would learn how to be with this loss and tragedy and disaster that does come into human mortal lives on a fairly regular basis? So the dark goddess, in the myths about her, I like to think of myths as maps. And so the myths about the dark goddess hold some clues for how we might begin to deal with this journey that happens to us, often unwittingly. As I said, it's not like we're standing at the gateway of the underworld saying, oh, I'm ready to go down now, I want to meet the dark goddess. It's more likely, you know, like you're being dragged there by your hair, kicking and screaming and saying, no, I don't want to go down. I don't want to lose everything. I'm not prepared to let go. So mostly we have this experience of tremendous resistance, of really, really fighting the process, and of being terrified because we've got no idea what will happen to us, or even that there is a way out, a way through on the other side. When we look at the myths that go down on this journey into the dark goddess, we can actually learn something about this process, about what it's like to journey to the dark goddess, what happens, and even how to come back once we've done that. And I believe that we can apply those steps, those lessons, to our own lives, to us. So for example, all the myths and most of the fairy stories say that in order to visit the dark goddess or to go into the underworld, you have to leave everything behind. You can't take anything with you. You can't take your best friend, you know, you can't take your partner. You can't really take your beliefs about yourself. You can't really take your personality even. You certainly can't take your jewellery or your credits in the world, who you're known as. None of those things can come with you into the underworld. And the myths are very clear about that because, for example, Inanna's myth, the Sumerian myth, has her descending through 7 gates into the underworld. And at each one, something she really values is stripped away from her, is taken away. And at the last gate, the 7th and final gate, her life is taken from her. And so everything that she's held on to is stripped away from her. And you'd think that would just be the end of the story, but it's not. Down in the underworld, something really mysterious happens, and I think that is the heart of the mystery. It might be different what happens for us in that moment, each time we do it, and for each person. But somehow, in that place when everything is stripped away from us, when there's utterly nothing, we do find something. I think it's like the spark, like the essence of our true self. Because what happens for people when they return from those dreadful places in their lives, places of losing someone that they dearly love, places of terrible crises of health or spirit, relationship, what happens is that they return inspired. They return with some sense of finding themselves. And people after a disaster, when they have gone through it and come out the other side, they almost always seem to say that they've found a truer version of themselves, that they've realised what's important to them in life, that now they know what they want to do with their life, and now they know how to do it. So that just seems extraordinary to me. It doesn't seem like it can be some kind of accident that keeps happening. And it begins to cast a different light on the whole journeying into the dark, into the underworld, into the realms of the dark goddess. It begins to make it look like it might actually have some value. Not just value in surviving it and getting through it and kind of scraping yourself back together, but actually value in finding your soul, your truth, what's really, really important. So I came up with this concept that why do we wait? Why do we wait to be dragged down there? Why do we wait till we're having a crisis to go and visit this part of ourselves? It's fear, it's habit, it's not being taught. But what about if we were to say, perhaps some of that huge resistance that we meet every time we have to do it, perhaps that could be tempered a little if we did it deliberately sometimes. If we occasionally, and I like to do it in ritual, but people have different ways to do it, like art would be another way. If we occasionally went to visit this dark goddess, went into our innermost selves, a place where we can take nothing of the outside world, if we were to do that deliberately, what would happen then? And one of the things that I think would happen is that we would, because we're not in crisis when we're doing it deliberately, we would gain some idea of the terrain, of what happens to us in the underworld. We'd get a sense for how I am. I would get a sense for how I am in the underworld. Each person doing it would get a sense for how it is for them. And then when we were in a crisis, when we were just having a terrible time and compulsory, forced to go to that place, we would like have a bit of a map of our own. We'd have a bit of understanding about what that place is like and how to do it. I think that for me, like, this is a great time of year to be doing this talk and to have this book come out, because the year is showing us that, you know, the dark goddess and the underworld are not just some kind of strange thing that strikes out of the blue that happens every so often randomly. They're actually part of the cycle of nature and the cycle of life that we all live through. And when I look at the moon is dark just exactly as often as it is full. And it spends just as much time transiting from dark moon up to full moon as it does from full to dark. So there's no priorities put there. It's not like a full moon, you know, it takes up more space or gets more time than a dark moon. They're equal. And the journeys towards them are equal. And with the year, at this time of the year, you know, we can feel the shifting, the sifting away, the falling away. And we have to go with it, really. So for me, learning to tread that path down into the underworld and journey with the dark goddess is coming into tune with the cycles that exist already. And with our own cycles of being born and living and dying. And it's like taking a step towards the dark goddess willingly, rather than waiting for compulsion and necessity and being forced there. I also believe that this is a really kind of fundamentally important and human task to undertake. Animals, trees, the world, they do it anyway. They do this journeying into the darkness, into the underworld. But we've kind of lost it. We've kind of decided to have, you know, lights on all night. We've kind of decided that the economic market should always go up and up and up forever, always. That we should always increase the amount that we own, the amount that we do, how happy we are, that it should always go up and up and up. And not only is that not realistic, but it doesn't give space for the necessity of the darkness, for the culling, for the falling away, and I believe for finding our essence. So that's a little bit about my relationship to the dark goddess. In the book, I go in quite a bit of depth into following the actual myths and mapping those out in pieces, especially the Inanna myth, but also Persephone and the other Greek myth of Psyche, visiting the underworld. And so I'm going to ask for questions. So we're now in the question section.
How was the process of writing the book? How long did it take?
Technical question. I have written a few books other than this, and I have to say this is the hardest book I ever wrote because I followed someone's advice, which is quite popular advice, and I'm really keen to dispel it. And they said Just write it any old way and later on you can organise it. That's kind of the worst advice I've ever had in my whole life. That is a terrible, terrible way to write a book for me. So I did do that. I've spent about 20 years doing work on this dark goddess story and thinking, and I've done a lot of workshops and a lot of work and ritual on it. So I had a lot of material. So I just wrote it down, you know, and when I had about 40 or 50,000 words, I started trying to organise it. And it was terrible. Like some things I'd written 3 different ways, but they were the same thing, and I had to try and correlate them. And some things, there would be gaps where I hadn't written anything at all, and it was very disorganised. So I'm never doing that again. It's come out okay, but it was like, I felt like I was wrestling with it, which maybe with the dark goddess is very appropriate. Wrestling with it because I'm a writer who likes a really tight structure. I love things to be really simple and obvious and clear and progressive and match up, you know, be neat and clear. And it took me most of a year to write it.